You're listening to Tabletop Arcanum, a podcast dedicated to learning and exploring the hobby of tabletop gaming. Your hosts are Justin Taylor and Richard Geese, so sit back and relax as we talk, discuss, and joke our way through the hobby we love so much.
Hello and welcome to Tabletop Arcanum. Today we're going to be going over the GAMA Trade show, brought to you by the Game Manufacturers Association. Of course, it's me, Ricky. I'm here with
Justin.
And joining us today is
Tony.
Tony and I were sent from our local gaming store, Lindsay Gamer Garrison, and we went to GAMA this week.
Oh, he's going to be so happy we actually used their name.
Yeah, I know. But, considering he helped pay for the, room and got his tickets in there, it kind of helps to acknowledge our gratitude. Yeah, went to GAMA. That was a whole lot of fun in Reno. I've never been to Reno.
Was it the biggest little town or something like that?
That's their catchphrase, yeah.
How little of a town was it and how big did it feel?
It was little in all the wrong places. Let's put it that way.
Rough.
That's exactly what the neighborhoods were like. So
Yeah.
yeah.
They're getting a Panda Express soon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, things are really coming up Reno.
Well, it was a topic of discussion at the local Kinko's FedEx. So
It was.
yeah.
I wish I was making this up, and no, that was a hot topic at the FedEx.
But we wouldn't have known it if Justin weren't eavesdropping on other people's conversations. So
She was standing next to me.
yeah, but you had to remind me that that's what she said because I wasn't listening. I was doing the politically correct thing and
Trying to figure out how to ship all the stuff that we got back.
yeah, no, trying to stuff a box filled with more stuff than we could fit. So
Yeah. Let's start with the roll recap. Talk about what we've been playing since the last episode. Then we'll get a little bit of introduction to Tony. And then, Ricky, you've got questions about GAMA.
Well, I've got news, too. I mean, don't forget, stuff is still happening. Things were announced, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, a lot of stuff happened at GAMA, too.
Well, there was also the New York Toy Fair, which, gave us all kinds of fun new little things that I'm probably not going to go over, but I do have one
Okay.
that I want to talk about.
Okay.
Roll recap. All I've done, I've been stuck away from my house due to multiple car problems
Yeah.
and traveling. So I just played a lot of Arkham Horror in my hotel room out in Salt Lake City when I was out for training.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Getting the feel for the game now and feeling good about it.
Oh, yeah. Thoroughly enjoying it.
Excellent. Yeah, my roll recap is pretty light if we don't count all the random demos and things that we played at GAMA itself. Besides that, we messed around with Call to Adventure, and we messed around with Tiny Epic Galaxies, and hosted a store championship at Lindsay Gamer Garrison this past weekend. So that was 10 players. We did 4 rounds of Swiss. A lot of fun for most people, and unfortunately not everybody had all the fun, but you have winners and losers in tournaments, and that's what happens. I didn't play, I just ran it, and then afterwards we kind of hung around and played a game of Disney's Villainous.
How is that? I still really want to play that.
I've got better feelings on it now. Once you play with people who actually kind of know what's going on, the turns take a little bit faster compared to the first time I played with 6 players and had to teach it to everybody.
That sounds rough.
And the attention span was rough. The new expansion characters are kind of neat. I got to play Hades, and Dr. Facilier was also out. So
Very cool.
Got to play some of the new stuff too, which was interesting. But yeah, that's really my roll recap. Nice light week because I was out doing seminars and things at GAMA for most of my week. Let's bring it around and talk about Tony here, who is our first ever guest on the show.
hi.
Hi,
Thanks
Tony.
for having me. Long-time listener.
It's true. So Tony, how long have you been in the gaming hobby?
Well, I guess it depends on when you want to call it, but I think the definitive moment when I went from going to the game of life and Monopoly to actual gaming was when I was in 4th grade, which is, for those of you who can't see me, probably about 25 years ago. No, even longer than that. It was a while, but I picked up my very first copy of Axis and Allies from my local AFES when I was in Germany. So bringing that home, seeing all the little figures, and then actually learning the rules to play it and everything like that, that was probably my first real serious game that I picked up, and I never looked back. So as soon as I turned 16, my first job was in a hobby store. I got to take part back when the Magic craze was just starting and a bit crazy in a small town, so getting product was almost impossible until everybody got product. Fallen Empires was not the best-selling Magic expansion out there.
No, I have...
Or maybe it was the best-selling for Magic at that time, but not for the stores that were carrying it.
Yeah, I have weird memories of Ice Age specifically, which was right around that same era.
Yeah, and I couldn't invest as much in the Magic community as my friends could, because I also at that time picked up Warhammer 40K and what was called Warhammer Fantasy, now Age of Sigmar. So I've been gaming, trying just about every game that comes out and enjoying them. So I play a little bit of everything. So
okay, any particular favorite that
yeah,
either a soft spot in your heart or just won't go away?
I have a few that I like to play. Fury of Dracula is a blast to play with any group of people, especially since playing as Dracula, I am undefeated. And I really, really turn up the screws on people when they're sitting there, arguing and getting really close to knowing my location until I give just a slight nudge, and then they all go awry and go the wrong way. So that one's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then I do enjoy the tabletop war games as well. So Warhammer 40K, I've been playing off and on for most of my gaming life. So that's another one that's really big.
Yeah, I actually remember one of those specific Fury of Dracula stories you told me once, where it was because you have all the cards that places you have been, and they're either land or sea, and like clearly you were not in sea, but you had to check, like maybe I'm here.
Yeah.
And the entire table was like, "What are you doing?" Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and then there was the time when I did that with the full board, and you look at each card and you gently put it down, and you don't want to give away any information, so you look at each card, even though they may have found your spot. But during that, I also had on my iPad the music program I used that allowed me to play the Toccato and Fugue. So I was sitting there playing that while I was doing that, and they were just looking at me like I was an idiot. But I still won, so
Right. And then I guess my last introduction question for you would be then, what have you been playing recently? What's the most recent things you've been doing? Besides
a lot of the things that we shared because we were at the GAMA convention together, one thing I think you forgot to mention was our Game of Thrones game. We played the big, was it 5 players we ended up with?
6.
It was a 6-player game of the Game of Thrones board game with the new Mother of Dragons expansion, which was a lot of fun. It definitely was an interesting game, and we had some interesting plays. A lot of the players that we had with us were pretty competitive, so it was great to see the game played out without somebody who was just sitting there twiddling their thumbs or getting easily distracted. So, although we were driving it pretty quick because we did want the game to end within the same day that we started it. So,
and we pretty much pulled that off.
Yeah, no, it was pretty good. There was some tension just because we were driving hard. We're like, all right, everyone, focus, stop. And my first time playing the second edition, which having played the first edition extensively, it was a nice change, and I like a lot of the elements and learning that they put into the new version. So
right, even though it's not really that new anymore.
No,
but with the Mother of Dragons, it did. I personally like the fealty, where all 8, depending on the number of players and if Targaryen is picked or not, you're looking at pretty much all houses that are available or out there on the board.
Yeah.
You don't really have those generic neutral tokens anymore, which it makes the game look a little bit more impressive and play a little bit more interestingly. So I enjoyed that too.
Yeah, that was great. And then the only other game that we've been playing pretty extensively is a game called Thunderstone Quest by AEG. Deck building game, but with a quest element to it so that you have a ton of different options. I think the base game with the expansions and stuff, if you had gotten the Kickstarter, was over 1,000+ cards. Even more than that, actually. I'm trying to remember, but it was quite a lot. And so, finally getting that to hit the table and play through. My friends were a little iffy, and they're like, "I'm not quite so sure." But once they started getting into it, they really loved the way it comes together and everything. So that was quite fun.
Good. That's that. Ricky, you've got some questions about GAMA. So
I still have news, Justin. Let me talk about the news.
He looks excited for those of you listening at home.
I'm starting to take a more serious role with the news.
I know. So go for it, because most of my news comes out of GAMA. So
yeah, some of the stuff. Well, we both talked about Talisman, how now the IP floodgates are opening up. They announced the Kingdom Hearts. Since then, I don't know if it was officially announced, but they had a picture with Batman Talisman.
I've seen the board.
You've seen the board? Okay, well...
They had it out of GAMA.
Well, then it's officially been announced.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's coming.
Yeah.
They're also making a Die Hard game. Not Talisman related, but Die Hard.
I want to know more about that later on.
I have no information. They literally had a prototype out there, and were very, no pictures.
But the board was the top level of the Nakatomi Plaza, so
Yeah,
you can
that's about all we got.
simulate some gunfights on there.
I'm pretty excited about this. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
It'll be a Christmas favorite.
We got out of the New York Toys Fair, we got Chewbacca Bop It. It's the only thing I really want to bring up, only because you got to let that Wookiee win, man. There's no winning that game.
So, scratch it, shave it. What are we doing to Chewbacca's Bop It?
I don't want to twist it.
Pull it.
Oh.
Disarm it. That's how they're going to say it. You can do it however you like.
Yeesh.
But then we got a Renegade Game Studio is coming out with a sequel to Lanterns, which for those who are not familiar, fantastic game, came out in 2015, tile laying game. Very just fun, easy, quick. I didn't get too much information on it, but it's a roll and write game, and it continues the story from the original one.
Yep.
So the other one I did see, I'm a little hyped about. I don't know if I should be hyped about it, but Judge Dredd, Helter Skelter, by Osprey Games. It's essentially it's based on Martin Wallace's Wetlands gameplay. It's going to be its own standalone game. You can't mix everything, but it's going to be a standalone. Each player controls a faction with special abilities, so on and so forth, just like Wetlands before.
Yeah.
So
that's exciting.
Yeah. So now I got some questions about GAMA, Justin.
Oh, okay. We can talk about GAMA now.
Yeah. So what is a GAMA?
I repeat back, what is an Asmodee? Because that was a question that apparently kept coming up during GAMA. It's anytime they came up, they're like, the first question we always get is, what's an Asmodee? I'm like, really? That's the first question? Okay. GAMA is a trade show for manufacturers, retailers in the gaming industry. So happens once a year in Reno during their in the casino itself, and they have different ballrooms and stuff sanctioned off for things like seminars, events. Then they'll do game nights where people are showing stuff off, demoing, getting the hype and interest out there. And then they'll do they hosted some other tournaments. There was a Shadespire tournament, there was a Keyforge tournament that people could play. But yeah, essentially you, as a GAMA member, you get access to that trade show as well as all the other resources. So it's a big networking show for people.
Excellent. What should you expect from any of the presentations if you were working for, or if you were game shop owner, or anyone who's in the Game Manufacturers Association?
Well, one of the things you'll see at the show is a variety of things. Because it is obviously being sponsored, that's where the cost of the show is being paid. You're going to have your usual time with manufacturers where they're going to basically present to the retailers their spiel, their thing, what they want you to focus on with their products. So that's a part of it. But the other part of it, the part that we found extremely informative, was the retailers talking to retailers portions, where they came up with ideas that they feel would be beneficial to teach these retailers. So you have people with years of experience, stores that have been open for years or that are just performing extremely well, creating seminars that they feel would appeal to fellow retailers, stuff that they need to learn or want to learn in order to make their store better, make their community stronger, things like that. So those are a couple of the elements. And then, of course, you're going to have your grand presentations and such, where they basically want to give you the information on what's coming up and why you should be excited and things like that. So,
did they tell you anything that you should be excited about that you're excited about?
There's a few things. There's quite a number of things, actually, that we were pretty excited about. Some things that we had excitement about before we got there, but seeing the actual product was one of those things where it was simultaneously great and a relief, because you're like, well, they got this franchise, and we weren't sure what they were going to do with it. For instance, Gale Force 9 has the Aliens franchise, and they had a board game announced. I saw the advertisements, and it was just a simple one-page mock-up of the box, and that's it. So we're like, all right, is this going to be good? And from what I've seen, I'm impressed. I think they're doing the right things with it, and I think it's going to be an exciting game, and I'm a big fan of the franchise, so just being able to confirm that with my own eyes is definitely a big plus.
Excellent.
Yeah. With Nemesis being the not Alien franchise game, but kind of feels like the original Alien movie, where there's a lot more suspense of what's going on. Their game is going to be more focused on like the action of aliens, and more you're playing the Marines, you're killing the xenomorphs and stuff like that. The other cool thing that during that seminar we learned is that they are doing only 2 expansions planned for it, and that's it. So it's going to be relatively simple. Like, the game will have a finished box, because you get about half the Marine team in the box, and then one of the expansions is the rest of the Marines that don't come in the box. And the other one's going to be Ripley versus the Queen. So you can do like the final
That's cool.
The final battle, and I think a couple other versions of anytime Ripley and the Queen kind of duked it out in some capacity. So, yeah, that was a good franchise. Also from Gale Force 9, they talked a little bit about the fact that they are managing the Dune franchise from Frank Herbert's estate. They're going to be redoing the Dune board game, modernizing it a little bit, but primarily trying to bring it back so that it's back in print and people are excited about it all over again.
That's awesome. So with your badges, I saw they had 4 levels of badges: retailers, manufacturers, designers, and distributors. You both had the retailers. Did you feel limited by your badge at all going there? I know they had certain events that were geared towards certain people within the community. As a retailer going, was there stuff that you couldn't do that you wanted to do, or?
I didn't really feel limited. It was a lot of events, and they had broken them down based on who would get the best value out of them. But in a lot of the rooms we were in that were supposedly just retailers, we did have distributors there. We did have game manufacturers there as well, so they sat in on some of them as well, just to see what we're seeing and get a feel for what we're doing on our side of the business. So.
Right.
Okay.
There was a little cross-pollination around the different seminars, but they did, during the schedule, make it very clear, like, these are going to be very designer-focused or these are very distribution channel-focused, but nothing was really blocked off for anyone. The only time is, I think, like, they had the non-retailers had different dinners areas, and they probably had different presenters during their sponsored dinners, and that's about it.
Okay, so they provided dinner and they had people just up there talking during
Mm-hmm.
dinner. Okay.
Yeah, that's actually a standard of any trade show. If any of the listeners out there have ever been to them, a standard fare, you're going to have your overall presenters, sponsors are going to get up and stage and give you their spiel, try and sell what they're offering, and then you're sitting and eating a meal while you're listening to that. And then, of course, you have your actual sponsored rooms that you have to go to learn and do it and everything like that. And they provide incentives for going, or they punish you if you don't go, depending on your particular trade show. So, yeah, it's very similar with the number of trade shows I've been to for different companies. It's very similar in how it's run. So,
All right.
Yep.
And then what events did you both enjoy?
both enjoy.
I mean,
yeah.
what you enjoyed, and then Justin, you go first. You tell me what you enjoyed, and then Tony, tell me which ones you enjoyed.
So, oh man, there's a lot of fun stuff that kind of happened. Some of the seminars were very enjoyable. I actually really liked sitting in on the Pazio's Pathfinder 2nd Edition seminar and getting a lot more download of what's changed, what's working, what's not working, and how they're setting up 2nd Edition for later this fall as a release, because they've been doing the play testing since last Gen Con. And this Gen Con they're going to launch it. So kind of like 5th Edition Dungeons & Dragons. They kind of done the public taste test. They got a lot of feedback. Some of it was not very kind feedback, but in that sense, it was a really good positive thing that they learned from people and went, yes, this is good. We need to fix this, drop that mechanic, whatever. And I'm definitely going to be talking about that later this year as those start coming out, because I'm pretty excited for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Not something I was already kind of aware of. That was another good one was the Asmodee Studios seminar. It was one of those more sponsored ones that we had, kind of like, you're going, right? Seminars. And they went over essentially like 12 or 14 of the different studios that belong to them. Like the Catan Studios, Days of Wonder, Fantasy Flight. And then what they did is they kind of broke into a little bit of which ones do what and kind of their focus, because Days of Wonder is very more casual and gateway style game focus, where Fantasy Flight is a lot more narrative, story heavier games for the most part. So while they have all these different companies, they all kind of fill different points of the industry. And of course, they announced some of the new ones, including the fact that Kaman, or Cool Mini or not, is now part of the Asmodee distribution channel. So from a consumer standpoint, you shouldn't really notice any difference. The retailers are really going to be the ones that have to kind of shift where they're ordering from and what distribution channels they're using to get those games. But overall, I think it's going to be more of a positive experience, because now if Kaman is out of a thing, or the distribution channel is out of a thing, you're not trying to hunt it from like your 4 or 5 different distributors anymore. It's, either they have it or they don't, and that's the end of the story. So
fair enough.
Tony?
Yeah, so there were a variety of different types of events, and there were quite a number that were enjoyable. We had a particular event where they talked about events at the store level and how a lot of people are undervaluing these events, and as such, it's hurting your local game store. And it was great to see the math of that, to see that a lot of these game stores that end up closing their doors are doing it because they're doing these events and they're just losing money hand over fist, and creating an unnecessary expectation in the industry, so that makes it very hard for these stores to sustain the kind of events that people start expecting.
Right.
So it was a great presentation, a couple of good presenters there, one of who's a member of the board, and awesome guy, high energy, fantastic out of Denver. So that was a great presentation to see. But then we had other events. I met the guys from Cubicle 7 who do a lot of role-playing games. Couple that people may have heard of are the Warhammer Fantasy role-playing. They just put out the new 4th edition of that. They also put out they're putting out the Age of Sigmar book, so there will be one based on the new franchise from Games Workshop. And then, of course, they've got the Lord of the Rings franchises. Adventures of Middle-earth, which is the 5th edition rules for Lord of the Rings, which has been a great seller for them. And then the One Ring. So listening to them talk, listening to the passion they have for the product, especially the Warhammer 4th edition, because these guys have been writing/playing in it since the 1st edition came out, and they're pretty passionate about it, and they're doing some really good things with their starter set. So if people are interested in checking out that game, that's a great entry point, which we did later that night. Because of their presentation, I convinced Justin to come with me to sit down at the table. We got to sit down with Tim from Cubicle 7, and he basically ran the game for us with a bunch of other people, and we enjoyed it thoroughly. It was a lot of fun. Craziness happened. Some of it probably isn't safe to say here, just because of the violence that we decided to go for.
Yeah, Tim did a very good job of GMing it, and the first thing he did after everybody okay, these are the players that I got on my table. what's your tolerance level for gore, violence, and other things? Because we are playing in the Warhammer universe. It's not a pretty universe. I just want to know everybody's comfort level. And pretty much the entire table color looked around like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. Describe and go as gory as you want. None of us are going to flinch.
Give us some hyper violence. Let's do this.
But that was actually a fun table to sit at because we had people from other RPG groups, companies sitting with the table. We had a guy who had never really role played before, sitting down with us, and then other industry professionals. And it was interesting because like Tony and I were like the retailer side of things, and then we had developers and other people in the industry, and so it was a weird combination, melting pot of people coming together to play that game, and it was just a ton of fun. So much so that they pretty much had to push us out of the room at the end because we just kept playing.
Yeah, and we really had a chemistry for a bunch of strangers getting together. We had a chemistry that worked really well, and the game sounds like a fun system. So I've been digging through it, and I'm looking forward to probably running some games in that system in the future. So,
yeah, that was. Speaking of things that we did jointly that both enjoyed, that was one of them, and then the other one would be the Mondo Studios Game Studios / Restoration Game Seminar that we went to too. So that one was a special event that they were running to talk about their new Unmatched game, which is based off the Star Wars Duels game. That they're bringing. Essentially, they're bringing back that mechanic, and then because they don't have the Star Wars IP, taking that off of it and putting things like it's the main box is going to be King Arthur versus Alice from Alice in Wonderland versus Sinbad versus Medusa. So you get all four of those in the main box. And then they have a 2-player box that you can also get Robin Hood versus Bigfoot.
Are we talking like Sinbad the comedian? Because I'm all about this right now.
It's an important distinction I've had to make several times. It is not Sinbad the comedian, but rather Sinbad from the Legends.
Missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. That could
Future
be a
expansion.
great promo.
It's true. And one thing that they were talking about is one of the first promos is the head of Restoration Games is a huge Bruce Lee fan. So, of course, they're making Bruce Lee as a standalone character. And the beautiful thing about it is with the characters I've already mentioned, we're talking Bruce Lee, a actual human being that existed in Earth, with Bigfoot, who might exist.
He definitely exists.
Medusa, who, maybe. And then, characters of literally fiction, like Alice in Wonderland and the Jabberwocky. So, and you pick whatever character you want, play on multiple different boards that are all themed for the different characters, and just have at it. A lot of fun, plays quickly, too. And everyone's very unique, too.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is because of the way that they're designing it, every set that you get, other than maybe the Bruce Lee promo, will come with everything you need to play, because you'll get a 2-player board that you can play with the Robin Hood and Bigfoot expansion, or you'll get a 4-player board that you can play with the primary core set. And then, of course, they've got a lot of plans for the future for it as well, because they're as excited as we were after we played it. So
They're literally calling it like Heroes of Legend Volume 1, with the anticipation of there will be more volumes to come afterwards. The art is probably the thing that blew me away the most on the character architects.
That was the important thing with the...
which is where Mondo Studios comes in.
Exactly. So great art. All the same artists, so it has a theme to it. This artist has really impactful and action-packed art that makes it really kinetic. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So really kinetic artwork. And then they're not just sticking with the Lands of Lore and, of course, Bruce Lee, but what's the next expansion they're coming out with? Do you remember?
Yes. So they announced that they are going to do a Buffy expansion afterwards. So you're going to play in the Buffy universe, and you can have Buffy versus Bigfoot now.
Yep.
Or Buffy versus Bruce Lee.
And
I really want Giles versus something.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who they choose for the characters on that. And he was so excited. He was like, and eventually, we're probably going to do Dracula, so you can have Buffy versus the original vampire. So,
right, Monsters of Legend, things like that. Like, the possibility with the system is just kind of open.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is really exciting about it. Mondo Studios, and then the partnership kind of goes back ways. So Mondo's really good for movie poster art and things of that nature. So they are starting their game studio now and are going to be making games. So Restoration Games is kind of helping them out in that aspect too. And we saw some interesting things, but can't talk about them quite yet. And I'm going to be trying to reach out to Mondo Studios and see if we can get some, at least a green light to start talking about it whenever we can, or see what sort of information we can kind of get as it comes out, because it should be this summer and this fall. I'm really excited to see what they're going to be doing with their stuff, because it sounds like they've got some good ideas.
Stay tuned for additional details on that, because
Yeah.
that's going to be exciting for a lot of people. Sure.
So that was the big stuff that we shared. I think both of us walked away and just were like, this is awesome.
Nice. Were there any kind of, the Mondo games, anything that came out of the left field you guys didn't see coming that blew you away?
I believe the big one was the announcement from Come On, which is how they prefer their name to be used, Cool Mini or not.
Yeah. It stands for Cool Mini, it's not CMON, as pretty much everywhere in the world used.
And themselves as
and
well.
And themselves even. But now they're kind of rebranding to Come On.
Yeah. But them going with the exclusive through basically one distributor now because of their association with Asmodee. That was a pretty unexpected thing. So that was an interesting announcement. And from a retailer side, it's probably more exciting than not, because for some of their products, finding that product at the various distributors can become quite a pain, especially when you're hunting it down. So having a source of truth in a single distributor, being able to tell you whether you can get it or you can't get it, is a huge thing. So that was a pretty much an unexpected twist that we had there.
GW, Games Workshop, had their announcements. We knew that they were going to announce something, because almost every GAMA they have something that they show off and tout. They had like record-setting growth last year, which is almost the exact same thing they said last year. So the company is very healthy and doing very well, and Age of Sigmar is doing them very good things. So they have the new Forgotten Lore that they're announcing for Age of Sigmar, which is still kind of a mystery of what that is going to truly entail. The only thing they've really come out and said, it is not another Stormcast Eternal Vault, despite the video looks like it is.
Yeah, it's going to be related to Magic for all factions, is what it said on the Warhammer community page after the announcement at GAMA. So definitely something to look forward to if you're in that into that genre. So
I'm thinking it's going to be something like the Endless Spells, and kind of another Magic-based add-on that you can mix into your games, and we'll see. Maybe it's like Dark Chaos Magic stuff that everybody gets access to, and then you get Corruption and Taint.
Yeah. It was some interesting stuff at one of the seminars I went to. It was the ICV2, which is the industry data giant, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe them, but yeah, basically they do all sorts of polling and data crunching to come up with lists, top 10 RPGs, things like that. And there was a few surprises. Really strong performer last year was the Legend of the Five Rings RPG was actually in the top 5, which was a surprise to see. So there was some interesting data that came out of that it's different when you're in a certain area and you see a certain trend in your area that doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening in the rest of the world. So
right.
So it was pretty interesting to see that, and in that presentation had a lot of interesting data that I can't wait till they actually release it all online, because they had just gotten the data a few days before, and they said they were going to percolate on it and just make sure that it's data that they can trust and put out there in the public. So so keep your eye on that if that's stuff that that drives you, because that's some pretty interesting and cool information there.
One that I'm a little torn on personally, I'm not exactly sure. I think it's both good and bad, is the Unlocked game series is changing up how they're selling it. Right now, 3 scenarios come out, and they're 3 small boxes at a time, and like each wave is like another set of 3 boxes. So going forward, they're going to actually put all of the 3 scenarios that would come separately into just one box. So you buy all 3 at once every time.
Mm.
A little bit easier to store, a little bit easier not to have to hunt down.
Mm.
But maybe you don't want to buy 3 at once is the only thing that I was like a little bit off. And then Time Stories Revolution is coming up, which was an interesting one because right now with Time Stories you buy the core box, and then every little subsequent back you need that core box to have. Revelations kind of is a refresher on the game, and then what they're going to be doing is each box is almost more self-contained, where you don't have to have, it's not going to be as reliant on a prior purchase anymore, which will help people get back into the game.
Yeah.
So,
and then something I guess a little more out of left field is WizKids had an announcement during one of the meals that looked pretty interesting. They call them Warlock tiles, and a lot of if you've ever been to any major gaming convention or you may have seen it online, there's these dungeon tiles that people make that are fully painted and just really good quality that you can put together and make your own dungeon. Usually fairly cost prohibitive. That's unfortunately the thing that goes with that amount of quality. But they're looking to put out something that is cheaper, fully painted, modular, and can allow for setups that you usually can't get in that. So those Warlock tiles look pretty impressive, and I'm looking forward to seeing those come out because of their affordability. I can see a lot of people going through and grabbing them because of that. And the floor tiles are double-sided, so on one side is the stone that you'd expect from most dungeons, but on the flip side is wood. So you have wood floors and everything like that.
So kind of a town mode versus dungeon mode.
Yeah, because they're like, we're wasting the bottom side of these tiles if we don't do something with them. So that's what they ended up doing.
Very smart. Kind of in that same D&D RPG news, I was sitting in the Gale Force 9 seminar. They're the ones who are kind of in charge of translation of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition into other countries. Right now they have 5 different languages that they go into. As of today, they're expanding this year into 4 new ones. So Russia, Brazil, Korea, and Poland are all going to get translation into the localized languages. But one of the things that, since they're a licensing partner of Wizards of the Coast, they actually, Wizards and them kind of came to a terms and agreement when they put out those blind boxes for like the Mad Mage module and things like that, where you can get the minis painted for the characters that are in there. Mad Mage, for example, came out, what was it, 3 months after the module actually was published? Not when you need it, but like 3 months later, and then if you're running it right away, now you don't get it. So they came to terms, and they're actually going to be publishing those almost very close together, if not exactly at the same time. So your blind box minis will come out when the module comes out at the same time.
Nice.
Same thing with like their maps and stuff that they do for it. So that's very exciting because that's when you need it. Then they are also the ones that do all the like spell reference cards. They're going into the Volos cards and the Tome of Foes, so they're kind of rounding out the rest of the ones they haven't hit yet. But then they're also going to be doing epic monsters and legendary magic items, which will be on like 5x5 cards. They're huge, but that's how you get like the Tarrasque, and you get your deck of many things. The things that have like 2 pages dedicated to them in the books, because that's how complex they are. They had to find a way to make a bigger card to be able to do it properly. So those will be coming out, and that'll kind of round it out, and they'll just kind of keep up as things come up now.
Yeah. Now, speaking of translations, one I kind of fanboyed over was a company called R. Talzorian Games. They're the ones that do the Cyberpunk 2020 RPG. They've been around for quite some time, and they had a table set up during one of the game nights, and so I got to go over there and speak to Mike Pondsmith, who's a big part of what they do and everything there.
Yeah,
and they had a great demo set up for the video game that's coming out from the makers of The Witcher, CD Projekt Red. And it was great seeing that, and then sitting there chatting with them. They were sharing stories, and one of the members of that team, she came over and she was explaining. She's like, "Hey, did you ever hear why they decided on Cyberpunk as their next project?" And I'm like, "No." So she turns to me and she's like, "Well, at one point, I decided to greenlight a Polish translation of our system, and it ends up being that these guys at CD Projekt Red played it when they were in high school and fell in love with the system. So when they had a chance to do the next thing beyond The Witcher, they decided Cyberpunk was their thing, and that's the whole reason that collaboration
awesome.
happened. So
Right.
it was great to see.
They
That's
specifically
so
reached.
great.
Yeah, they specifically reached out to Mike Pondsmith and went, "Hey, can you come to Boland? We want to talk to you."
Yep.
And he was, and like I talked to him, and he was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll go." And then that's where they kind of pitched him, and he saw what they did with the Witcher series and went, "These guys are passionate. They care about my product. Let's do it." So, when I've been watching the Cyberpunk videos as they've been coming out. I know, Tony, you've been excited since essentially like they announced at E3 a couple years ago and then went silent.
5 years ago, because
been 5
I
years
just
already?
got it on my Facebook as a reminder that I set my wallpaper or whatever it's called, my profile image to the Cyberpunk profile image. So
Right.
yeah, the trailer came out 5 years ago. That was just a teaser, had a song, Bullets. I can't remember who the artist is.
Right.
I downloaded the song because I listened to it so much. So yeah, no, to say I was excited is probably a bit of an understatement.
But then,
so.
as a fan,
Mhm.
they went completely dark. We didn't hear about it for like a couple years, and then just last year they did the big press release with like a 48-minute trailer gameplay footage behind closed doors. Then they it's like a month later they released it publicly, and this thing is just gorgeous.
Yeah.
And you see really what they're doing with it. And that's the scary thing of like these guys are passionate, they care, and to not have faith in them was kind of weird because it was like this. Okay, they did The Witcher really good. CD Projekt Red knows what they're doing, and then there was like that moment of doubt always, like, oh, it's Cyberpunk, and now learning that they grew up playing this game, so they care about it. And when you get like the creator of Cyberpunk kind of like in your corner going, these guys I have faith in them, kind of reassured me. It's like, no, this is going to be a great game. Whenever it comes out, I'm not going to rush that.
Yeah, and they're collaborating as well because the original RPG is called Cyberpunk 2020, set, I guess, next year now at this point.
Right, next year.
But
Cyberpunk.
the new video game is 2077, so they're working extensively with each other to world build and fill in that gap, and that's going to be a focus for release of modules and things like that to fill in, and important characters in the 2077 universe are going to be developed in collaboration with Mike Pondsmith and the team. So
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mike specifically was telling me how he had to fill its void and create a break industry and create a like global war without being able to send the world into a dystopian future, something that they had to recover. So he ends up targeting shipping and distribution and trade. So like ships on the ocean are lost, stolen, missing for like years, and like trade routes are disrupted, which sends the whole world into chaos. Recoverable eventually over time, but not to the point where it's a complete dystopian Mad Max verse, but where a lot of stuff went down and a lot of corporations get at each other's throats during, I think it's the fourth corporate war, I think he called it. I'm not exactly sure.
yeah, I don't remember the specific details on it, but yeah, it sounds like he put a lot of thought into it.
Yep.
It's also worth noting that our Talzorian Games is also the one that will be doing the Witcher RPG. So
Yep.
those of you who are looking to do more role playing in the Witcher universe will be able to pick that up from them and jump into that world as well. And the book is a beautiful book, so
The core
I'm looking
book's
forward
already
to
out.
it. So yep.
And then they're working on the Witcher's Journal to expand more lore and more stuff into the universe as kind of the next release for it. So it's exciting. I
Yep.
like it. So
Awesome. So, last thing I have to ask is, I heard a rumor that Star Wars, what was it? Outpost. Hold on.
Are you talking Outer Rim?
Outer Rim. There we go.
Yeah.
Star Wars Outer Rim was there. Did you guys take a look at that at all?
the box was there.
Yeah, a mock-up of the box,
How'd
which
the box look cool?
the box looked great.
Yeah.
Okay.
They did a presentation about it, and they said that they are taking the storytelling aspect from, like, say, the Arkham games, the board games and everything, and they're bringing it to the Star Wars universe. They said
Right.
that they've gotten the miniatures down, they got the simulations down. This is the one thing that they really haven't done with the Star Wars universe, and that's what their focus is on this one, and it looks great. It looks like it'll be a lot of fun. especially with some of the stories that you'll be able to tell once you've finished the games and you're telling other people about what happened. So.
Right, and then they did stress that there's going to be not only the solo mode in it, so you can actually play just by yourself, but they also are going to build in some replayability too, with how the scenarios and stuff are going to work, to where once you've played it, aren't necessarily bored with it.
I'm pretty excited for that solo mode.
Yeah. Han Solo
squared.
So lots of interesting things coming up. Only other one that I thought that was kind of neat is Plaid Hat Games has their next storybook game. So they had Stuffed Fables, and then they had Comanauts, which used that like spiral bound board game book where like you open it up, you play on the book itself is the map, and you have the scenario on it. The next one's going to be Quirky Circuits, which is a co-op robot programming game. It is The Mind, which is a Pandasaurus card game, meets Robo Rally. So you can't, and so Robo Rally is that classic game where we're trying to race around different checkpoints in there, and we play action cards, and we all flip them one at a time to figure out what our robots are doing. So you get that action programming mechanic there. But this is going to be a co-op game where The Mind, you're trying to organize cards in a sequence without talking to each other or communicating. So combine those two elements of now we're cooperatively programming this robot, but we can't talk about how we're programming this robot. So we have to. Scenario one was you're like a Roomba, and you're trying to clean up dust bunnies, like very basic. But now add the mechanic of we're all controlling the robot together, and the fact that we can't talk about how we're going to control the robot together is going to be interesting and fun to play. 26 different scenarios I think they're going to put in the book. Wow. So lots of actions, and you get more robots, so it's not just a Roomba the entire time.
And then for those of you who are miniature war gamers, there's an interesting one that I'm looking up more information on, but they're called Conquest by Parabellum Games.
So
miniature display they had there were just amazing miniatures. Interesting concept for a game. The rules are available for free from their website. Anybody who's going to Adepticon, they will be there as well, displayed. So definitely check them out and take a look. They're going to have 2 factions to start with, and then they're releasing 2 more factions supposedly by the end of the year. So that was definitely one that was impressive, and I had to make sure I sat down and chatted with them on. So
right. So it's humans versus like abominations to start with. Faction 3 was going to be like fire magic dwarves.
Yeah.
But not like your short Lord of the Rings dwarves, but like pro weightlifter dwarves.
I thought more biker, biker build.
Yeah, no, I can see that too.
Yeah, instead of being short and stubby, they're
just broad
like
and muscular. And then the 4th faction is the one that like I like the aesthetic of. It was Vikings.
Yeah.
And then like their heavier units are going to be like your ogres and your trolls and things of that nature. So the models look very cool.
Yeah, and the game concept is definitely unique. So it'll be interesting to see how it actually plays out. Because of the way you do your faction building and everything like that, and your action economy. So definitely an interesting game. Definitely one I recommend checking out and seeing, if nothing else, for the models.
So any other questions about GAMA?
I think you guys said everything. I mean, it all sounds like we're going to have a fun year coming up.
Yeah.
I think we're all going to Gen Con, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, hopefully we'll start seeing some of the stuff that you guys saw today, or not today, this past week. Yeah, and we start seeing some of that stuff out there, be able to get hands-on with some of it.
A lot is going to be launching at Gen Con.
Yeah.
Like that Unmatched game, I think they're targeting Gen Con release, so there's going to be some cool stuff going on, and it'll be a fun year.
Yeah, definitely a lot of good things to look forward to. A lot of new things being done, which is great to see as well as building on established franchises. So we're excited to see what's coming up, and again, just to emphasize, Mondo Entertainment looks like they're doing some interesting things too. So keep your eye on that space. That'll definitely be exciting.
So I'm going to be reaching out to them directly and seeing what information I can get, or see if we can maybe line up an interviewer with them or something. I want to do something and see what we can do.
That'd be awesome.
I had a good long conversation with Crafty Games too. So we'll see if we can reach out to them and get some of them on the show, because they did the Mistborn House War Kickstarter, as well as they do the Mistborn RPG. And the new expansion for the game is supposed to come out this year. This is something that's been struggling to come out, and talking with them, I had some really interesting conversations around that expansion, and some of the challenges and hurdles that they had on the development side. And I think that's going to be a great conversation to have. Of when you have this Kickstarter you backed, and then all of a sudden it's like a year, 2 years after they said that it was supposed to come out, and getting a little bit more like what sorts of things can happen in the development cycle.
Yeah.
And then the other great announcement that we have is from Tabletop Arcanum is Brotherwise Games is sending us a copy of Call to Adventure to give away.
So we are going to be doing a review on it for our next episode. So keep an eye on our Facebook. We will be posting the rules of the giveaway. And yeah, no, we're very excited. They're very excited to work with us and send us a copy to give to our listeners. So
yep. And then I think that just about does it. If anyone has anything else to say.
This ain't your grandma's GAMA Trade show.
You're right. It isn't.
I've had worse.
You've definitely had worse.
It depends on when you hit the casino floor, because I definitely saw a few grandmas pulling me out. Old one-armed bandit, so.
that is true. So I want to thank everybody for listening. Thank you, Tony, for coming on and talking with GAMA with us. And as always, we do appreciate the feedback. And if you have any questions, definitely tabletop.arcanum@gmail.com is how to reach us best. But we're also on Facebook and Instagram. And I think, Ricky, you're doing more Twitter-y stuff
I'm going to be
now?
getting more on Twitter, so we'll put up our Twitter handle shortly.
Cool.
So that we can get everything covered.
Excellent. Well, that does it for this episode. We'll talk about Call to Adventure and keep an eye open for that contest. Until next time, this is Justin.
And this is Ricky, and I was hoping to have the St. Your Grandma's GAMA be my outro, so I'm going to re-say that. And
You've been listening to Tabletop Arcanum, hosted by Justin Taylor and Richard Geese, and featuring the original music by Paul Moore and Isaac Gilbert. You can follow us on most social media platforms. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. As always, thanks for listening.